5 Live.
I'll be the roundabout. The words will make you out and out. I spend the day away. Call it morning, driving through the sun and in and out the valley. Hearing your wondrous stories. Hearing your wondrous stories. I still remember the talks by the water, the proud sons and daughters that knew the knowledge of the land, spoke to me in sweet accustomed way. Down at the edge, round by the corner, close to the end, down by the river. Seasons will pass you by. Get out, get down.
Close to the Edge with Yes, 48 years and 21 studio albums later, and there aren't many people who would argue with the statement that they are one of the most successful progressive rock acts in history. And they're going to be at the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow later this month at the start of their latest tour. They're going to perform Fragile and Drama, the two albums, in their entirety. And this is going to be the first European tour that the band will have undertaken since founding member Chris Squire, the bassist, passed away last year. I've been speaking to the band's iconic guitarist, Steve Howe, and I asked Steve why old guys making music is having such an impact these days.
Well, I don't know. I do. I mean, the rock and roll thing kind of changed a dynamic that you didn't used to, changed the dynamic from what it was, which was that, you hated your parents' music. And then suddenly when the rock and roll generation grew up, the kids started to like the rock and roll music. So they took it with them. And we noticed that with our boys and girls, when they were young. They adopted, they were into things. They liked their new music too, but they sort of knew what rock and roll was, and they took it from us. And I think that's reoccurring, and that makes the interest, for a young band or young guitarist, young drummer, whatever, a group like Yes comes along and they think, well, these guys have been at it for years, I wonder how they do it. So, there's a double dynamic there with people coming to us either, it's remarkable really, but I think it's a sign that, good ideas or good production and good songs, last,
Yeah, well, how about musicianship? I mean, it's one thing to say, I wonder how they do it, but you chaps really, really have it down, don't you? It's not easy to do what you do.
Well, we don't make it purposely difficult, but we like to make it fun for ourselves. And that, when you take a tune like, on a Sound Chaser or something, or Close to the Edge, those are pretty adventurous ideas. And there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of influences. And those, we all brought different influences, and I brought a multitude as much as everybody else did. So when you squash those all together and have those performances like that, I think, it's a pretty good thing that has, lasting value.
We played a little bit of Close to the Edge there, as well as Roundabout, and when I watched a very old interview that you did with MTV, I don't know if you remember it, in 1984, you were sat down by MTV and asked a whole lot of sort of pre-programmed questions. Yeah. And it went on for a while. But what you said then was that you thought Close to the Edge was probably the best thing Yes had ever done. Do you still hold to that view?
Well, I was asked earlier today what my favourite album is. I don't really have one, but whenever somebody asks me, I can always cite one that I think currently or just at that moment is great. And today I said Close to the Edge, and the guy said why, and I said, well, it was the first big 20-minute piece we did, the title track, but the other two tracks strangely opportunist. Everybody's taking every opportunity they can to kind of make their music real, and of course we believed in the ideas. So there's a lot of cohesion, there's a lot of collaboration, and John and I wrote some wonderful things together, like Awaken and Roundabout, things like this. Lots of topographic ocean. So there was a strength in that writing power at that time that was really something to behold. As much as Chris and John, of course, wrote great songs together as well, and so it went round.
Now there you are. You've confused my other listener because he's going. Now wait a minute. There's two Johns in here. One of them is John Anderson, who's still not back in the group, right? John Anderson, would that be fair to say John Anderson will never be back in Yes these days? I
don't think that's fair at all. But I was, of course, referring to John. With songs like John Anderson,
yes,
Awaken and Close to the Edge and Roundabout. That was John Anderson. We were talking in the past tense there. So yes,
yeah.
I don't know what the future holds, but right now, John Davison has been in the band for many years.
Yes, you're a singer. Wonderful.
Mark on the band, and he's all round very much capable to kind of carry on. So at the moment we don't know where, but we know we've got a show that we're doing over this year that's going to be really exciting. So we're just moving ahead as we are, because we need certainties, we need availabilities, we need commitments and things like that, and that's what we've got. So we are a sort of internal Yes hub, if you like.
A Yes hub. That's rather fun. Well, listen, I'm thinking about that, and obviously think about Chris Squire. Still, you must be sad, because he was such a fundamental. The only guy I have read who's actually played until his untimely passing in every Yes lineup.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was quite remarkable. Of course we miss him and everything, but we've with his blessing and consent, we've kind of ploughed on with Billy Sherwood, who's doing a remarkable job, and he plays everything with the utmost respect. And there's nothing else but transparency in the way that we're doing what we do. We play Chris Squire's music as much as we've ever done, and occasionally more. So in a way, there's, we're finding, as we did at the very first show, that we've done about 30 shows now without Chris in the US and on a cruise. And basically we find that people actually thank us for carrying on. They say, well, we know this must have been difficult, but, thanks for carrying on. And if that wasn't the case, we would have been booed off the stage, like for 30 shows. Instead, we found that people like the rapture. They like the involvement. We're not alien musicians. We're warm. We want to play for people. We want to get the best out of ourselves so that they get the best. So it's a touring band. This band does tours of 30 shows. Bang 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 bang. A few days off. Bang bang bang. A few more days off. But we enjoy it, and that's the way we've been for the last 8 years. Since we met Oliver Wakeman and Benoit David, and they carried on with us for a while, and then Jeff Downes and then John Davison joined us, and now Billy Sherwood. So it's an evolving thing, and that's why it carries on.
Yeah, it's really great. Oliver, of course, being Rick Wakeman's son, your original keyboardist, and do you still have good relations with Rick?
Well, I hope we try and keep good relations with everybody, but obviously people put their foot in it occasionally. But, obviously there are always people from the bands you've been in that you have stayed closer to, and other people you haven't. And that very much depends on who makes any effort and who's got any time and how much you can. So, it spreads itself evenly across the so many members of Yes that we've had. Yeah. Besides the other bands I hasten to mention I've been in. But, it's a lovely thing. There's a pool of musicians, and, we can reach out to each other when we want to.
It's wonderful. The way that you see yourself is interesting too, isn't it? It's about somehow this fine balance between being part of a group of musicians and yet being an individual musician at the same time.
Yeah, that's funny how that really does springboard through Yes, because not only did I get the opportunity to to release Clap on the Yes album. And then the next album, Fragile, had solos from everybody on it. And then, of course, then we changed that direction quite a bit. But that was to satisfy the band instead of breaking up, we all did solo tracks. And then the next time we all felt, hey, I like a bit of room, we all did solo albums, And so we've been quite sensible in that respect, I guess, because we have kept in the 70s, we kept a tremendous 10-year, it was, with the 60s as well. It's like a 12-year period of constant music.
Let's talk a little bit about band sound, because also one of the things that I learned was you bought your first big stadium PA from Iron Butterfly in America. And up to that point, there wasn't really, you were saying to MTV back in the 80s, any really good PA sound in Britain. Was that really the case? I mean, I know the Beatles couldn't be heard at Shea Stadium, and that was pathetic. But is it really true that everybody who tried to play to a live crowd couldn't really make themselves heard properly?
Well, to a degree. I mean, there's quite a lot of bits of answers in there. Like Shea Stadium, of course, a big place like that, even America was under-equipped to really amplify that. We could do that easily now. Clear Brothers could fill that place with sound, easily. But you've got to contend with the screamers. And I saw a clip, where Paul was saying the other day, we got, when he did say this, he said, we got to quit because we can't hear ourselves. If we can't hear ourselves and the audience can't hear ourselves, what's the point? So in a way, the screaming did kind of destroy it. And PAs in the 60s, and Wem was a British company who, used to stack them up. You get like 12 cabinets aside and everything. And it would be an attempt to simulate. But what happened to us, Iron Butterfly brought the PA over with them, which is very unusual. And then it was so good. And it was just 3 speakers. One was an enormous W bin. Then there was a mid-range horn. And then there was a high frequency on the top. And then we had this, Altec mixer, with big knobs on them, not faders. So we saw this stuff and we thought, well, that looks pretty good. And we heard it and we went, Jesus, that's like sitting in sitting at home listening to your hi-fi. It's amazing. It had bass, it had mid-range, it had highs. So of course, when they were going to leave, we said to them, what about that PA? And they said, well, you can buy it from us. So we got a loan and then we bought it. And it was quite a lot of money at the time. But we said penny because we were as proud as monkeys as going out. The next gigs we went out and we were like, okay, set up that PA. And there was no comparison to anything at that time in England. So we did have one of the best systems. I mean, other people tried for us, and I thank them endlessly. But this just did it. It sealed it.
Yeah, but that would have something to do with the kind of music you play, wouldn't it? You cannot play this complex music in public if you can't be heard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The intricacies are vital, and the dynamics. I'm not saying we couldn't. I mean, Pink Floyd and when I was playing with Tomorrow, we just used to kind of battle with this sound and make as much noise as we could, and it was an attempt at it. But come the 70s, systems like that, and then they got adopted as more normal, and people started doing them here. Obviously made sound get much, much better, and now, of course, you can get a better sound out of something small than you used to be able to do. Everything used to have to be big, there a truckload of W bins, these bass speakers that go under the stage, just so you could project not only Chris Squire's bass, but Greg Lake's bass, everybody else's bass. Otherwise, you couldn't hear it. I think the bass made a progression in the 70s that the drums were trying to do in the 60s, which was be heard. When you think of early records, the drums were really in the background. But of course now, that was Steve Howe beatbox. And basically, it's changed. The whole dynamic's changed.
Of course, Chris was such a prominent bassist, wasn't he? This idea that you could be a very melodic bassist and really be heard, really be prominent.
Exactly, yeah. There was John Entwistle, Jacko. There were people that Chris admired, that he was up there with them. He became such a a recognizable force because he was melodic, and also he was very. In the studio, he was actually very calm and controlled. On stage he got a lot wilder, but basically in the studio he really did craft his work incredibly well. It was admirable, but we all did. That was the idea. Well, there were no fools in this band. There was nobody that was going to let the side down.
Did you have scores or charts before you began something?
Yeah, all through the 70s, we always rehearsed before an album, and basically charts would get made, but they'd be, varying on, there was only Rick who really bothered to occasionally write on a stave with some dots on it. He might do that occasionally, but most of our lives, particularly with John and I and Chris, it was just a chord chart, a piece of A4, and it says at the top, hopefully a song title, but that can mean, song one or something. And then a bunch of chords, and they're very rough, they don't tell you much. And it would work from that premise. But mainly it was recording. Once we could record it, even on a cassette player, the next day we could say, that's how we played that, let's play it again. And then we could get somewhere with arranging. Or if we didn't record it, we might forget it. And I'm sure we did some even more amazing arranging that we actually forgot.
But the complexity of some of your routines, like the harmonics and things on Roundabout, that must have been something that you worked out ahead of time. You can't just walk into the studio and think of that, surely.
No, I didn't. No, we were all, you had to have something of your own to put with somebody else's. Sure, you could. Yeah, what you did if you sat down and somebody said, "Oh, I've got this song. It goes like this: jingle, 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 jingle," and then you go, "Oh yeah, I got something like that. Does it go with this?" And that's the way you start creating together, and it's as simple as that. But you've each got to have something. You can't. But you could start with nothing. You can go in a room and say, well, that's it. You've got to.
That's it. Yes. Yeah, we've all got blank sheets of paper. Good luck.
Yeah, it's like an artist. He's got to have some colours and a canvas. We got to have an instrument and a tape recorder, or a digital recorder,
Yeah. Well, and can you tell us a story about the time that you were recording in Switzerland? And Rick Wakeman decided to go and play this church organ because you wanted that church organ sound, except you couldn't obviously get the studio to the church, and you couldn't get the church to the studio.
Yeah, it was remarkable that we didn't actually just remotely take a 24 track to the church and record it. I don't know why we didn't do that. We could have rented a mobile. But what we did was I think they got ISDN lines, telephone lines from the church to the studio. There was a sort of delay. I'm not quite sure how we got around the delay, but somehow it is actually true. Yeah, so the band were in the studio, which was at the time part of the Montreux Casino as well. They used to kind of give you a part of the studio. They had these movable walls. So we're in the studio going 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and Rick started it. Dun, 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 dun. We'd have to hear that, and we'd be playing with Rick. Yeah. And but the song's actually very complex, and I almost can't believe it. I don't know if we'd laid down the track and then Rick kind of overdubbed. I can't imagine it. But I know at one time we tried to play together, but that may have been too much. But I don't want to invent anything because offhand I can't quite remember. Chris didn't have any ideas for the guitar at all, so I just had to kind of doodle around and find out. When I play it live, I kind of take some of the ideas and make them a little bit more structural than they are on the record, because some of it is a lot of ad-libbing, which I love, and I do copy some of those ad-libs, but I kind of shaped it a bit more. But it's a lovely thing to play. Singers will always tell you that is high, high for the lead singer, not what Chris was singing, but Jesus, high as anything. So very exciting song.
Very exciting. What gave you the idea when you were going back on the road in the US in your present format to do complete albums? Why did you decide to do, Close to the Edge over there, for example? And why are you going to do Fragile when you come to do the European tour?
Yeah, I don't always shoot my mouth off, but I said to the guys, we ought to be doing albums, and it didn't sink in for a little bit. So by the time it did, we started doing them. And in fact, somebody else said, why don't you do 3? And he was like, well, 2, 3, suddenly we were doing 3. So we took on the biggest challenge of all on the very first leg, which we brought to Europe, going for the 1, Close to the Edge, and the Yes album. It was amazing. So basically, that's the only tour we've ever done with 3 albums. Since then, we've developed a 2-album concept where we play 2 albums and we play some other songs, in a sort of like more of a new. So you get a bit of each of the concept. You get solid albums too, and you also get some tunes kind of that we want to play. We think they're nice to play, and they make the evening work for us, and that's how we're treating it. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to play. When you start a song, like Roundabout, you know that it's not really going to end until, the end of the sunrise, because it's that feeling. And that's really exciting. You can see South Side of the Sky ahead of you, and you can see these things. And, it's kind of like, it's more conceptual, obviously, because it's like when you go to see, like the London Symphony Orchestra, it doesn't have sort of question mark. We're going to play, we'll decide on the night. You kind of go knowing you're going to hear, Beethoven's Third or whatever. That makes it kind of like the audience are really working with the performer, because they're not saying, oh, we're just going to come and see you whatever you play, which is like a normal show. You're going to play some hits. But this is different, because they actually kind of commit to us that they want to hear drama and Fragile. That's amazing.
That's great. That's marvelous. Yeah. I also this idea of these big places. I mean, you played super big. Now you're playing concert halls. The London appearance is the Albert Hall. That's going to be a wonderful thing. That's an instrument in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. That's quite a mindful. You go there and it's like, well, this is one of the ultimate kind of performance rooms in the world. It's one of them, and it's pretty amazing, pretty daunting, slightly daunting. But you just hold your breath and walk on that stage and think, well, let's give this a try. But yeah, it's lovely to come back like we did a couple of years back. I mean, we know that we need a certain level of intimacy to start with, and also we know that it's not like we're the favourite flavour of the music business at the moment. We're a very solid backbone to that idea. We're a group that's been out proving itself since 1968. I mean, it's kind of like crazy, like the Rolling Stones. I mean, it is something, that I only speak like that occasionally. I'm not constantly, selling myself our own publicity, if you like. But it's nice to say it once in a while and realise, yeah, we're part of that historical kind of band, and it's nice to be there.
It's wonderful fun. Just to, do that a little bit longer, can you remember some of the people that you've opened for? I mean, you opened once for Janis Joplin, I think, didn't you? I mean, just to get that sense of historic continuity.
I don't actually remember Janis Joplin.
Did you?
It may be. Well, certainly we opened for Black Sabbath, Jethro Tull, ELP, I suppose.
ELP?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kinks. That was memorable because they pulled the plug out on us.
Oh, no. Why?
Yeah.
Because you were going on too long?
Oh, yeah. It almost caused a sort of fisticuffs, but it was great fun as well. So other bands, we've had some amazing bands open for us, like the Eagles opened for us, believe it or not, when they first started. So we're proud that we opened for Marvesian Orchestra. Now that was one of our high spots. We were really
for John McLaughlin.
Yeah, of course. Love John to bits. Hello, John. So basically, that's a proud moment. Like, Iron Butterfly, we were there because we had the opportunity, but we were there because we felt good, and we've done some pretty interesting opening spots, I'm sure, that don't come to mind immediately, but Alice Cooper, I think. Many in America that, might be forgotten. I think once we opened for Grand Funk Railroad, there you are.
How's that? Now, you mentioned John McLaughlin. McLaughlin, is he a favourite guitarist of yours?
Oh yes, one of mine, my favourite. Yeah. I mean, John's played the socks off sometimes. Remarkable. But what I love about him too is his versatility, his musicality, and his originality, because he's done a lot of different sorts of things that just moved comfortably within his comfort zone, as they say, like that kind of sitar-ish kind of guitar he was playing with his band. So he's done a remarkable amount of things. Because I met John way back when he was playing with, I think it was Gino Washington and the Ram Jam Band back in the 60s, So I most probably opened for the Gino Washington and the Ram Band Jam featuring John McLaughlin. And he always had a little Gibson amp at that time up on a very high stall. I adopted that approach, having an amp at ear level, not on the floor poking at your knees, but actually jamming right in your ears. And I think it helps me, and most probably does John too, if he still does that occasionally with a band. I mean, when I play solo, you don't need that kind of thing. But it's great. And I love John. And Martin Taylor, he's another wonderful British guitarist, actually from Scotland. He's remarkable. So there's a lot of fine players that have helped me in lots of different ways. So here's a hug to them both.
That's great. And I've heard you say that you really like the sound that Scotty Moore, who was one of Elvis's guitarists, produced.
Yeah, well, he like quite a few guitarists, had some strong country influences, and Chet Atkins really developed that style of playing to great finesse. What Scotty Moore did was play it with Elvis Presley, which was perfect too, because I think it gave Elvis the feeling that there was a guy there who really had roots in the kind of music that he did. And when you hear Rock and Roll 1 or Rock and Roll 2, those first two albums, they're incredible. That Elvis is strumming his guitar, Floyd Kramer's on piano, Bill Black's on bass, and Scotty Moore's on guitar. It's like a really hot band. Not dissimilar to what Rick Nelson had, in his own way. But obviously, the consistency of Elvis Presley's records then and through his whole career is quite astounding. So Scotty Moore was a big part of that. I met him at a party in New York State, and I just played a little bit with him. We're messing about on some guitars in this guitar collector's house, and I've got some pictures of sitting with the great Scotty Moore.
What about guitars? Again, it depends greatly for your sound, what kind of guitar you play. Do you change guitars? Have you changed guitars through your career?
Well, yeah, I started out wanting things. I had a couple of guitars, a really nice guitar, this 175 Gibson, like in 1964. So then I'm playing that, and then I get to the 70s, and that's the guitar that's on the Yes album. And then I start to think to myself, well, now I can get a collection, so every album's going to feature a different guitar. Because I was kind of thinking I ought to keep looking for my sound, but really that was not really going to be a big issue, because, fortunately, I do make a sound. And people seem to, recognize it a little bit. So, I had great fun. Relayer is all Fender Telecasters, and, I just had fun with particular kinds of sounds on different albums. I think it kind of helped, really. It was kind of a crazy idea, but I'd keep coming back to that 175, and I still do now. I come back to that. I mean, in Asia, I played a thin body guitar by Gibson also. I mean, I play a lot of steel guitar, and that's always a Fender, really. A certain kind of Fender where they're made with two pickups on the necks, and it gives it a much better sound. So I enjoy this, I enjoy wandering across these different guitars. I never stop, But there is a central thing that what I want is the sound I feel like making.
The very generous Steve Howe from Yes. And just to say that the opening is at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall on Wednesday the 27th. And they then play Newcastle City Hall, Manchester Apollo, Liverpool Phil, Sheffield City Hall, Bristol Colston Hall, Birmingham Symphony Hall, Brighton Centre, Oxford New Theatre, and finally on the 10th of May, the Royal Albert Hall in London. You're listening to Up All Night, and it's just before 25 minutes to 4.